Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Samswell33 here, and welcome to the show about Pokemon TCG stuff, mix-up. And today we have our Plasma Freeze set review. Plasma Freeze came out, I think, the 8th, that's 2 days ago. And yeah, definitely a very interesting set, although there are a couple cards that kind of will dominate the format. There is definitely stuff there's a lot of creativity to have in this set. If only you could actually use them in a tournament, because those dominating cards will just kind of take over everything, and anything else will just be bad. So, anyway, Plasma Freeze set review. Why don't we go watch that right now?
Normally, I would start this set review off at the beginning, but there are two EXs in this set that I will continuously talk about and reference when talking about other cards, so I thought I'd put those cards at the beginning to avoid any confusion on what they do. This set has a lot of cards to make straight plasma decks a lot more powerful, and Thunderous EX is going to be one of the best starters for any of those plasma decks. Its first attack does 30 damage and lets you attach an energy from your discard to one of your bench plasma Pokemon. This also includes special energy, so Plasma, DCE, Prism, and Blend are all fair game, as well as any basic energy. So, whatever crazy plasma attacker you want should work, since you could run all Prism and Blend energy. Second attack isn't too great, it costs 4 energy, does 90 damage, and if it has a plasma energy attached, you can discard an energy attached to the defending Pokemon. Not too great, especially considering how good its first attack is. Now, don't get me wrong, Thunderous EX is mighty powerful, and is one of the reasons Plasma Basics is so good. But this next card, oh boy, this next card, makes this deck almost as dominating as Darkrai and Heart Gold Soul Silver. That card is Deoxys EX. Deoxys' ability, Power Connect, gives all your Plasma Pokemon except all Deoxys EX in play 10 plus damage. Keep in mind that this can stack, so Thundurus can be doing 70 turn 1. You can also add Hit on Toxic Laser to bump that up to 100. So, weak little setup attack can now carry you through the whole game. This kind of early pressure, as well as late game power with new cards like Kyurem, and even stuff like Snorlax and Lugia, might be too much for this format to handle. And this is a format with this guy, and this guy. This format is probably going to end up like Heart Gold Soul Silver on, where every deck has to beat Plasma Box, or something that is designed to beat Plasma Box. Its attack is one of those Mewtwo needs to be countered by everything attacks that every psychic type comes equipped with. It does 30 damage, but if you have a Plasma Energy on the axis, it does 30 more for each energy attached to the defending Pokemon, which one-shots a Mewtwo if they have 2 energy on it. Mewtwo can still easily revenge KO a Deoxys, since Deoxys is also weak to Psychic. It's also just a decent attack in general. It's good against Keldeos and Black Kyurems that get 2 charged up. Now, let's continue our set review at the beginning. Our first card is Exeggutor. Pre-evolution Execute. Unlike Combi, though, Execute is one of the best cards in the set. No, I am not joking. You notice that ability? Pretty much every pre-evolution with an ability is good. Execute's ability, Propagation, says if Execute is in your discard, you can put it into your hand. And since Execute's ability gets reset when it goes into your hand, you could use this however many times you want per turn. This ability is incredibly useful when you use cards like Ultra Ball and Computer Search, since you don't have to worry about discarding useful cards in your hand. And I don't know about you, but Ultra Ball's discarding effect has been bugging me more and more every format. Even though I joked about Exeggutor, it's actually not terrible. Its attack prevents your opponent from using supporters next turn, and unlike Stoutland, there's no way around that effect. If you happen to start with your Execute, your opponent could get locked for quite a few turns. Chandelure is pretty much the new Typhlosion Prime. Once per turn, you can search your deck for a fire energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon, and put 1 damage counter on that same Pokemon. The difference between Chandelure and Typhlosion is that Typhlosion was popular in a format where stage 2s were attackers, and Reshiram's 120 damage could one-shot anything with enough plus powers and junk arms. Chandelure is in a format where a turn 1 60 is pretty common. Okay, to be fair, a turn 1 120 was pretty common in Typhlosion's format, but that was from a non-EX with 130 HP that could be hit by Outrage and Retaliation. Every Pokemon in our current format that can use Fire Energy either has some huge drawback, requires too much energy, or is too frail. It's not exactly easy to get 2 Chandelures out. Heck, some Stage 2 decks have a hard time getting 1 out. It's also weak against Keldeo, so Chandelure just isn't a playable card in my opinion. Sorry to crush the dreams of any Breshaflosion fans out there. Cryogonal could be quite a decent starter in both Blastoise decks and Plasma decks. Cryo Freeze costs 1 water energy, does 10 damage, Then you have to discard an energy attached to this Pokemon, and the defending Pokemon can attack next turn. If your opponent happens to start with their preferred starter, and they can't draw into a switch, then they're stuck there. And with Hypnotoxic Laser and Deoxys EX, this attack could also do some decent damage on turn 1. It also has an attack that lets you search your deck for a water Pokemon and put it into your hand, which is okay if you can't get an energy that provides water energy. But because of its lack of late game power, and the other starters that Blastoise and Plasma decks already have, Trigonal may just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. One of the best cards in the set has to be Cure. For a non-EX, this card has such ridiculous early game and late game power. Its first attack, Frost Spear, costs water and a colorless, and does 30 damage and 30 more to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, just like Landorus EX. This may seem like a pretty weak attack for 2 energy, but with Colorless Machine, this could very well be your opening attack. Its second attack, Blizzard Burn, costs just an extra water energy, and does 120, and Kyurem can attack next turn. Yet again, with Laser Burbank and Deoxys, Frost Spear can do crazy damage turn 1, and Blizzard Burn can even one-shot EXs with enough damage boosting. This card is almost too good. Any Plasma deck needs this card. It's simply that good. What? A consistency Pokemon? This is outrageous! Electrode's pretty bad compared to the cards of old, like Uxie and Claydol, but this is a format where all our consistency Pokemon are this, and this. Who knows? This card might actually be the best in the format. Mr. Mime's another old favorite Pokemon that's brought back in this set. Its Bench Barrier ability does just what you think it does. Protects your bench from damage. For setup decks that fear Landorus or Kyurem wiping out 3 of your evolving Pokemon in 2 turns, or even decks with just basics that want to improve your Darkrai and Plasma matchups, Mr. Mime is definitely a nice tech that will probably see play until it's rotated. Metagross is a Stage 2. Wait, why am I talking about this card again? Oh right, it has a good ability, yeah. Metagross lets you search your deck for a Plasma card and put it into your hand, but you can't do that with more than 1 Metagross per turn. So being a Stage 2... Wait, why am I even talking about this? This is a Stage 2. Your Beldum and Metagross and most likely rare candies can be turned into supporters and your consistency has been improved tenfold. Moving on. Ugh. Weavile is one of those Pokemon that is so hard to imagine without the other, like Darkrai and Sableye, or Blastoise and Keldeo, or even Garchomp and Altaria. Weavile's partner is one we've already seen in this video, Execute. Weavile's attack does 30 damage times the number of Pokemon you decide to discard from your hand. You can see the combo here, right? Discard 4 Executes, then get them back with Propagation, then discard them again and again until you've taken all 6 prizes. 120 doesn't exactly do much on a Stage 1, so you're going to need a few more Pokemon, or use cards like Hypnotoxic Laser, Dark Claw, and Deoxys to reach 170 or 180 to knock out EXs. Neither method is too hard to achieve, and combined with your item energy acceleration of choice, I could easily see Weavile Execute being a lower tier deck in our format. Absol is quite the nice non-EX attacker for Darkrai decks, since Klinklang is one of your worst matchups. Absol does 20 damage plus 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, for 2 energy. Klinklang decks especially need a lot of bench Pokemon, as well as Plasma decks, and even Electric decks. Absol's damage adds up quite nicely with Dark Claw and Laser, maxing out at 170. Absol doesn't have to be a Darkrai exclusive either. Plasma decks can also take advantage of Absol, with their abundance of multi-type energy, and just like Weavile, Absol has 2 great ways to accelerate energy to itself. As long as your opponent doesn't lower their bench too much, I see no reason Absol won't be played coming into Battle Roads. I almost didn't put Steelix on this list just because of how unbelievably terrible its second attack is, but Metal Defender is a half-decent attack in Klinklang. It protects you from fire types from one-shotting you. It is a pretty terrible card, especially since its pre-evolution isn't Steel type. But if you hate running non-Steel types, this could be your card. Kingdra has been getting some hype, but for all the wrong reasons. The hyped attack is Tri-Bullet, which hits 3 Pokemon for 30 damage. Why is this even hyped? Registeel does the same thing on a basic, and Registeel is pretty bad. Tri-Bullet is a bad attack. Moving on. The only reason this card should even be considered is because of Dragon Vortex. This attack does 20 damage for each water and lightning energy in your discard, then you shuffle all those energy back into your deck. In Blastoise, that's a pretty darn good attack. If you have 9 energy in your discard, that one-shots an EX. Then you have 9 plus energy in your discard, and you draw into them super easy, and you can just sweep with Black Kyurem. Being a Stage 2, this isn't going to be played very much at all, but imagine if it was. That would be something awesome. Everyone, rejoice! There are playable evolutions again! Yay! The new EV in particular has a pretty good attack. You search your deck for 3 evolutions of different types and put them in your hand. Crazy deck thinning for the win! Most of the evolutions are just okay. Espeon, Flareon, and Jolteon are decent in scrub decks. Leafeon and Vaporeon are just bad. But Umbreon and Glaceon can actually be good in a tournament deck. Glaceon reduces all your Team Plasma Pokemon's retreat by 2, which should pretty much give all your Plasma Pokemon free retreat, except Kyurem and Snorlax. Or if you really want to get 2 out, then everything has free retreat. But you shouldn't want 2 out, because Umbreon should take up most, if not all of your EVs. Umbreon gives all your Plasma Pokemon 20 plus HP. With 3 of your 4 Umbreons, all of your Plasma Pokemon become huge tanks. Even things like Kyurem that can be one-shot half the time, now become untouchable. This is one of the few decks I've actually tested in this format, and I have to say, what my thoughts are in the next mix-up episode. Kecleon is, interesting. Kecleon not only copies your opponent's active Pokemon's type, but its attacks. This is especially good against Dragon and Psychic Pokemon, since they're weak to their own type. This guy can trade prizes very well against Rayquaza EX and Black Kyurem EX, as well as Mewtwo EX. There are usually much better Pokemon for this kind of stuff, like regular Black Kyurem and regular Rayquaza, but I know some clever players will be able to find out the secrets hidden within this Kecleon. Now onto the trainers. Our first is Superior Energy Retrieval. Not Super Energy Retrieval, but Superior Energy Retrieval. This is a reprint of a card named Super Energy Retrieval, which lets you discard 2 cards from your hand and get back 4 energy from your discard. But you can't get back cards you discarded. The only deck this will see play in is Blastoise. In every other deck, it'd just be overkill. But what a card it is in Blastoise. This is pretty much a guaranteed black bullets to every turn. Now you can simply Skyla for one of these instead of Skyling for a retrieval and be forced to have another energy in your hand. No question, this card is going to be amazing in Blastoise. Team Plasma Ball does exactly what you think it does. Search your deck for a Plasma Pokemon and put it into your hand. Not much else to say about it. It's good in Plasma decks. Moving on. Floatstone is yet another alternative to Switch, and possibly even better than Switch. Floatstone is a tool that when attached to a Pokemon, that Pokemon has 0 retreat cost. This card is very good. It can be attached to a Keldeo, and you pretty much get a free switch and immunity to special conditions for the rest of the game. But if you don't have enough room / don't want to play Keldeo, Floatstone is still a fantastic card. The only problem is that you can't get out of sleep with Floatstone, unlike Switch. Most decks should run at least 1 Floatstone, if not more. Just be sure to keep a few of your switches in. Have you ever had a card where you thought, man, that would be so good if I could use Culver's Machine to that? Or, man, I wish I could use Deoxys EX with this card. Well, now you can with Team Plasma Badge, which makes the Pokemon this card is attached to a Plasma Pokemon. With Culver's Machine, you can power up a Pokemon like Bouffalon or Tornadus for crazy turn 1 potential. If you can draw all that stuff, that is. This card may be a bit clunky, but if you're feeling like a Luxac, this card just might be for you. Getsus probably seems better than it actually is. It's even a hollow supporter. When the heck does that happen? This card must be amazing! Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. Getsus lets you look at your opponent's hand and shuffle all item cards you find there back into your opponent's deck, and then draw that many cards. This may seem like crazy good draw support and disruption in one supporter, almost like N. But really, when will your opponent have more than 1 or 2 items in their hand at once? And for what reason would they have saved that item instead of playing it the last turn? In some cases, it can even help your opponent. Say they have 2 Catcher, 2 Laser, and a Juniper in your hand, and you play Getsus. Sure, you drew 4 cards, but they just saved 4 very important cards instead of having to Juniper them away. The times I can see this card being really good is on the first turn, where they're not in control of how many items are in their hand, or after your opponent junk hunts, when you pretty much automatically shuffle 2 important items back into their deck. This card could be featured in some disruption and lock decks, such as Amoonguss, Watchog, Mew, but that's all I can see this card being great in. Getsus definitely doesn't seem like a very good draw supporter, but it might be alright disruption. Shadow Triad is another supporter from this set, which lets you get back a Plasma card from your discard into your hand. While it does let you get back cards like Hypnotoxic Laser or Plasma Energy, or maybe even Plasma Pokemon, it uses up your supporter for the turn, and is completely dead in your opening hand. I like the idea of getting back Plasma Energy with this card, since Plasma Energy are pretty dead cards early game, but are crucial in the late game. But, as with many supporters, it's just not as good as other supporters to warrant your supporter for the turn. Sometimes a stadium like Frozen City comes out, and it looks really cool. Both players' non-Team Plasma Pokemon take 20 damage when they attach an energy to that Pokemon. Blastoise takes a ton of damage with this card out, and other decks can take crucial 20 damage just from attaching an energy. But then you realize, wait a minute, I can just use Burbank to do 20 more damage anyway. It can also be countered by another stadium before it does any damage to them. I'm not so sure this card will be played, but maybe a one-off to counter Blastoise. Maybe. Now to our ace specs of the set. Sadly, these aren't as good as Computer Search or Scramble Switch, but they can be game-changing if your opponent isn't prepared for them. Our first is Life Dew, which has a much less dumb-sounding name in Japan, Life Essence, but whatever. Life Dew makes your opponent take one less prize card when they knock out the Pokemon with this attached. This can be very game-changing, as you can probably tell, but a Tool Scrapper makes this card totally useless, and the opponent can just not attack the Pokemon with this attached. But, as I said earlier, if your opponent is prepared for it, or you play it on a Pokemon if your opponent is forced to knock out, this card can completely change the game. But if this card gets popular, every deck will start playing Tool Scrapper and it will suck again. Rock Guard is in a very similar camp. This card works just like Rocky Helmet, but it does 60 damage instead of 20. After just one attack, that Pokemon can easily be in one-hit knockout range, but again, one Tool Scrapper, or if your opponent just ignores that Pokemon with the tool attached, it will become useless. And it will never become universally good, because if it does, people will just start playing Tool Scrapper and your ace spec is gone. Now on to the other 4 EXs of the set, the first being Latios EX, which is terrible. Really, really terrible. It's useless in Blastoise since Black Kieran does more damage. Its first attack is the same as Stunfisk, and Stunfisk also has Muddy Water. This card is just so useless. I honestly see no use for this card at all. Thankfully, Latios EX has some sort of use. Its ability prevents all damage done to it by Pokemon with abilities. While this may seem good, you'd be better off using something that protects you from EXs like Siglet. You're still immune to Darkrai, Keldeo, Lugia, Deoxys, as well as things like Bouffalant, Blastoise, and Snorlax. But all the other EXs, such as Rayquaza EX, Black Kieran EX, Landorus EX, Tornadus EX, Mewtwo EX, and Thundurus EX, and you can even take advantage of its Dragon typing, since its attack ignores weakness. I don't like Latios EX, but it's at least fun, something Latios can't say. Heatran EX, sadly, is also just okay. Its first attack does 6 damage for Fire and 2 Powerless, plus 60 if it's affected by special conditions, which is good if it gets hit by a laser, but that's if it gets lasered. Its second attack does 80 damage for 4 energy, and if it has a plasma energy attached to it, it does 10 more damage for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon. So if all your opponent's Pokemon have 50 damage on them, or less if you have Deoxys out, then Heatran can theoretically sweep through all of their Pokemon, but if everything on their field is already softened up, you probably want to use Lugia EX instead. Personally, I'm not a fan of Heatran. Okay, I swear this next one is good. For our last card of the set, we have Tornadus EX. Yes, Tornadus gets a second EX form for some reason. Don't ask me. But Tornadus has a pretty sweet attack. Windfall lets you shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 6 cards, for 1 energy. Considering we don't really have any setup Pokemon, Tornadus can be considered a nice way to get yourself out of a dead hand, as well as a late game end. Even if it's not on the field, one of the biggest dead cards after an end has to be Ultra Ball, so you could always just search it out. But it does have a pretty big 2 retreat for a starting Pokemon, and its lightning weakness is a problem since one of the best starters in the new format is going to be Thundurus EX. Its second attack is pretty bad. For 4 energy, it does 60 damage, plus 30 for each plasma energy attached to him. It's pretty hard to get that many plasmas on one Pokemon. At least Lugia has Overflow. Also, as a bonus card, I'd like to take a look at the Landorus Blister promo that comes out the same time as the set. It has 2 attacks. The first costs 2 energy and does 20 damage, but if you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, it does 30 more damage. Well, that seems pretty bad. With 4 Deoxys or 3 in a laser with Burbank, that's enough to one-shot a Darkrai or a Thundurus EX. Its second attack costs 4 energy and does 90 damage, but the defending Pokemon can't retreat next turn. While that effect isn't very helpful against Darkrai itself, since you one-shot it anyway, it can work against Keldeo and Darkrai. Say you have 2 or more Deoxys out, you can capture their Keldeo, play a laser, and then use Rock Tomb. Then, they get knocked out coming into your turn, and you can capture a Darkrai and knock it out. That's 4 straight prizes if you can manage to set up that combo. It also has a lightning resistance, which makes it pretty decent in the mirror match. Landorus might seem like an alright tech in Plasma decks, if Darkrai is giving you some trouble.
And there you go. That's Plasma Free set review. I definitely like the set, as I said earlier. Deoxys and Thundurus will kind of be taking over the format. But other than that, there's definitely a lot of things to play around with. Definitely a lot of decks I can use for this show. And speaking of, my next episode will be on the evolutions that I talked about earlier. So yeah, Umbreon, Glaceon, and possibly one more. Which one? You'll never guess. You'll never guess. You'll probably guess. But anyway, I'd also like to announce something for Mix-Up. I am announcing a new sideshow thing for Mix-Up called Mix-Up Back to Reality. Yeah, I think that's the name I'm going to give it. Anyway, the show is going to be in the Fridays between Mix-Up episodes, where I don't have another Mix-Up episode ready, where I basically talk about a metagame deck and show you what I'm doing with the standard decks in the format, not like all my crazy other stuff that I do on Mix-Up. But Back to Reality will show what I actually do with tournament decks. So next week will be a review of the Thundurus Deoxys deck and how I've been working with that, and then the week after that will be the Umbreon, Glaceon, other stuff, evolutions, blah 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 blah. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you guys like the new side series, and I hope you guys will like my new shows that I'm, new episodes, new Plasma Free stuff. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Later.